Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, real estate professionals of all ages, we're super excited today to be meeting with Nate Joens. And just so that everybody is clear, Joens is Joens, not Jons. For those of you who are going to immediately stop listening to the show and start looking people up, which I know some of you do, and John and I are eternally grateful when you do. So Nate is the co-founder at Structurally, and Structurally is actually, I didn't have to have this explained to me by John. Structurally is an AI chatbot that has many different uses, some of which Nate, I am hoping, is going to explain what he's excited about in terms of how you would use it. It could be used in order to improve lead conversion rates or simply engage leads and keep them warm and nurtured. Anyway, it's an interesting technology. We've never had a guest like Nate on the show before. Nate, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, appreciate it, Robert. Thanks also, Jonathan, for having me on. Excited to be here, excited to talk about all things lead conversion. That's what I get excited about every day. The AI side of things is just kind of cherry on top, but excited to talk about those as well. I'm a co-founder here at Structurally. We've been in the market for about 4 or 5 years. I started this right out of school, so this is my one and only job ever, which has been a journey. We've really focused exclusively on working with real estate agents, lenders, leasing agents, kind of across the board, help improve their lead conversion. I always like to say, everyone gets leads, every business across the sun, but sometimes a lot of those leads get forgotten. And that makes, folks like you guys, I'm sure, crawl in your skin because you know the behind the scenes, you know how the sausage is made when it actually gets to generating leads. And then all that work goes for nothing because, we're kind of dropping the ball once we actually get the leads. And I think especially in today's market being so hot and crazy, that feels okay because you're still making money. But what happens when the market might shift at some point in the future? Have the blocking and tackling of lead follow-up. Have you done your job to set yourself up for success in the future? That's kind of all things that I've been thinking about, talking about on my own podcast in the past, talking with inside sales agents, and just generally talking to real estate agents for the last 4 or 5 years.
Awesome. All right. So before we dive deep into that, and believe me, we will, I want the audience to get reintroduced to the man behind the scenes. He makes the MailRight show happen. I oftentimes say it. I just want everybody to keep understanding it's very true. I'm like a personality. I show up, but John does all the production, all of it. He posts the shows. He does the show notes. He contacts the guests. He talks to the guests a few minutes before the show. He's literally every single foundational moment that goes into this thing. It's all John. And he also happens to be a very innovative entrepreneur in his own right, who's created a really cool marketing system for real estate agents that would kind of be something that they could jump into maybe before they jump into a bigger, more expensive system. I strongly recommend both him and his system, the MailRight system. So if you get a chance, please reach out to him, give him a call. But in the meantime, John, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for that, Robert. Every great man needs a good podcast wife. So there we go. Like I say, what Robert's, we combine the power of WordPress and Facebook to provide you more leads. A great combination of 2 great platforms and much else. So go over to the MailRight website and have a look at what we got to offer. I'm looking really forward to our discussion. And just to finish, thank you so much. Like I was saying to Robert, we had our biggest audience figures last month ever. And I think the podcast is growing. Thank you so much to all the new listeners and viewers. You're much appreciated. Back over to you, Robert.
All right, so we're going to dig into this a little bit. Nate has been kind enough, and in true MailRight podcast show fashion, I actually want to start off with a curveball. You mentioned prior to the show, as we were getting started here, that you used to do, past tense, a show on ISAs, and that you've since, seemingly, based on your language, abandoned the show. I'm kind of curious to know, before we get into structurally and some of the more common things, like, why did you decide to stop producing that podcast?
Really no reason other than it's a lot of work. So my hat is off to Jonathan for putting all that together. So it was a really good time. It was really successful. We learned a ton. It's still public. So it's just the ISA Radio podcast. We interviewed inside sales agents from across the country about their setup, their workflows, what makes them tick. And it was a blast. I mean, we learned a lot. The content that we were able to produce was kind of far and away some of the most influential ISAs were on the podcast with us. Honestly, we just kind of started to wind it down because of how much work it was. I think that there's always opportunities to continue to talk about inside sales agents because I think it's a huge staple to a lot of companies that if they're not using them yet.
Gotcha. All right. So for those of you who are listening to the show who may be newer into your real estate career, when we talk about ISAs, many more experienced agents, teams, things like that, I'm sure all of you have experienced the pain of having to follow up with your own leads at the same time that you're working with existing clients and trying to close deals. It becomes a very, very tough, like Occam's razor of the average real estate agent, where you just don't have time to do all the things that you should be doing. So something falls by the wayside, which Nate touched on earlier. It's probably going to be lead nurturing or lead management. If the lead's not super hot, you're probably not going to chase it down, call them 5 times. That's when you'd hire an ISA, somebody from another country probably, who'd get on the phone, call the lead for you, try to take it from a medium or neutral state, at least into a warm state, good enough for you to get on the phone so that you didn't have to call them. Do you feel like that's a pretty good explanation, Nate?
Yeah, that's spot on for sure.
All right. So now we've covered that weird curveball, that tangent. For those that don't know, and I promise you, many of our audience does not know, can you explain in the most simplest language how what is structurally, like, I'm your average real estate guy. What is structurally this supposed to do for me?
Text and email follow up with your leads, similar to MailRight, but also have the two-way communication back and forth once they reply. So it can actually plug into systems like MailRight, like others that do the outbound side of things. But once you actually get the response back, we have the two-way communication back and forth with the lead to kind of warm them up even further. A huge kind of paradigm shift that we've seen in the past little while, probably a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years. I'm sure everyone's probably pretty familiar with the phrase speed to lead. You get a lead, you want to be on top of them within 5 minutes. Otherwise, you're 21 times less likely to convert them. We've kind of beat that to death for the last while, and we've put in systems like autoresponders that are doing that immediate reach out. We follow up with people for a long period of time, but what we've actually shifted to seeing a more successful focus on is speed to response. So from speed to lead to speed to response, because all of these leads that you're actually getting to engage with you now, you've done all the hard work. You've generated the lead. You've followed up with them in a quick manner. You've got them to reply. They've replied. Then you have to reply back and actually have the communication back and forth. That communication, especially over text and email, compounds. As your pipeline is growing, you might be talking to 50, 100. Some of the top ISAs we've seen are managing 500 leads in their pipeline at a single time. So our product has that two-way communication back and forth with those leads over text and email to either disqualify them or qualify them. So you can kind of follow up with those hot leads.
Okay. I have a comment there. But guys, here's a good indicator for those of you who are listening to the show. So, can you hear me, John?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I seem to be, I thought I was blanking out there for a second there. Anyway, this is a very similar process, and rumor is it might even be the process, like a Ylopo would be using. So it's something where you could create many steps. That's why I'm so familiar with them, John. I have already been introduced and seen versions of the technology many times over. So it's something where you could add 20 or 30 steps into the process if you wanted to, where somebody sends you a response, you send them another response, you send you a response, send them another response. So you could really nurture a lead a fairly decent way down the conversation, all without having to have a real human involved. Is that a good summation, Nate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, John, do you, I can keep going at this all day long. Like, really, I can. Like,
No,
I'm
go ahead.
incredible.
Keep asking another question. We've got another 5 minutes, maybe, and I'm quite happy you to do the lead in this first half of the show.
Okay. So, an interesting thing a question that I have for you, though, is that you're billing structurally as an AI. And I think that that's slightly a misnomer because it doesn't do everything automatically. At some points, the agent and the realtor and the team get involved and they adjust the conversations to match their particular sales and communication branding style. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. We by no means want to say that, our scripts are the best, our follow-up cadence is the best. Agents know best. They know their business better than we ever will. And obviously, you want to tweak your vernacular to, locality wise. And our scripts, although we offer pre-built kind of out of the box scripts across the board that you can use for buyers, sellers, renters, investors, kind of everything in between. You can absolutely customize every aspect of our conversations, which is still kind of in line with AI. The AI side of things, like I said, kind of at the start of this, is what I like to say is the cherry on top. Like we know the brains behind the system here is powerful for XYZ reasons, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is we're having high quality human-like conversations with leads, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. All we're trying to do is convert leads from cold to hot. And we do that by building all sorts of rapport, having empathetic human-like conversations. And that's extremely important in industries like real estate and mortgage.
Right. And it also can, the way that I would personally describe your service, and by the way, I have described your service many times to clients that have asked me about it. And my clients tend to be more like real estate vets that have been in the business for a really long time, like power agents or small teams and brokers that have an independent brand in various places. And the way that I usually describe it is, hey, this might be something to plug in the middle of a lead generation system where perhaps you don't necessarily want to invest in a human being. Structurally would be a system that theoretically you could put in the middle of everything that might eliminate some of the necessity of a human. I personally would not say all of the necessity. I would just say that it could, if you're running a big enough lead generation system, it could eliminate like the need for one or two bodies, depending on how comfortable you are managing an automated conversation and how responsive your operations person is to constructing the conversation. In other words, getting in there and making sure that AI is, or the automated version of the text messaging system is being scripted carefully by a responsive member of the real estate team. I'm going to give you a chance to retort to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great spot to put, a system like this in. And, one of the things that we've always said is the role of Structurally is to augment the role of an inside sales agent. That's really at the end of the day what it does. If you don't have an inside sales agent, an ISA, you are an ISA. So everyone technically has one. If you don't have someone who's behind the scenes dialing, texting, emailing constantly, that's on you. And if you don't have time for it, I understand, but that's where it kind of comes down to, it probably falls by the wayside, and you have a product like ours alongside you acting as the ISA to kind of augment your role in that way. But that's spot on. You can kind of use structurally across the board, whether it's on brand new leads, whether it's on older leads that are kind of collecting dust, possibly. I know in a previous episode, I can't remember which one, Jonathan, I think you were talking about, what do you do in a hot market today? I think you kind of made the argument that you should shift and put your focus on your existing database. That's a huge use case for structurally or an ISA. Many of our ISAs that we're working with are focused exclusively on nurturing and converting their existing database. That's something that people use structurally for as well. So if you're more comfortable with having humans up front dealing with those net new leads, that's great. What we see a lot of teams is using structurally for those older, dormant, colder leads to try and bring some back to life and kind of sift through and mine for some gold in your database.
Yeah, I think that's a good spot for us, Robert, to go for our break, and we'll be back in our second hour. Over to you, Robert.
All right, lovely. So stay tuned. We're going to continue to have a conversation about structurally. I'm going to throw something at Nate that he will not be able to answer, but that's fine. But I am going to give a huge use case that all of you are familiar with, that every single person listening to the show has already heard of, and it's probably an unacknowledged use case of structurally, so all of you can get a feel for how prevalent this service really truly is, how much you can truly do with it, because I do think that it is an incredibly powerful tool. It's been proven to be so. It's not even a guess anymore. They've already had a huge adoption rate inside a very powerful marketing company that's taking over the real estate space. So with that, stay tuned for the second half of the show, and we'll be back. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back. We're in episode number 299. John and I must be insane. We've been doing almost 160 of these shows together. How John has...
Well, you might be. I'm not sure about me.
I don't know how John...
I'm sure Nat's really looking forward to your other questions as well.
It's more of a statement. It's not a question. I'm not going to put him quite on the spot with a question, because I'm fairly certain he probably has some kind of NDA that he can't actually answer. I figured this one out on my own. This wasn't something that somebody told me or anybody revealed, just so everybody knows. But here's a great use case for structurally. And since I figured this out on my own, and I'm pretty certain of my answer, I feel perfectly comfortable because nobody made me sign shit. That structurally is probably one of the key elements that is part of Ylopo. And for those of you who don't know who Ylopo is, it's a big marketing company. And one of the primary uses that I've recommended Ylopo for is exactly the use that Nate just said on the show. It's pretty much an almost unbeatable tool to take and then apply to, let's say, and I have a case study even, Nate. I actually have so much as a case study, because I put a client into Ylopo, and let's just pretend for a moment they truly are using their own customized version of structurally. So what it does is it then reaches out to all of the customers through a series of triggers, and the triggers are custom to Ylopo. I don't know what they are, but they're somewhere in there. And once a trigger introduces a service like structurally into the process, like it's got like a text that says, hey, you were looking at a property like in Monrovia. Are you still looking at that property? Because we have some new details and we'd like to reach out and tell you what those are, right? That's a text message, theoretically, that structurally could send out. Is that correct, Nate? Like that text message? All right.
Yeah. Yep.
So that text message gets sent out to a customer that has also already responded by clicking on like an IDX link, and now they're in searching for properties. So it's a double whammy in terms of follow-up. They've looked at a property. Now they receive a text message from you, theoretically, that's talking about looking at properties. It's an extremely powerful response system where, combined with other methods in general, you could really encourage people to essentially get on the phone with you via. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, I'm most excited about structurally in terms of text messaging. Like that personally for me that's the only use case where I personally, Nate, have seen something like this really fire on all pistons in terms of like lead generation. I'm sure there's many other uses such as like Facebook chat and stuff like that, but I haven't seen that like actually move the needle in terms of actual hard dollar ROI. I certainly could make an argument for nurturing, like I think you could, but I don't. But the text messaging bit, I've watched that take cold leads to warm. I've actually physically seen it in a client's account, so I can attest personally to the power of that. What made you came up with the? So I'm not going to put you on the spot, man. I'm not going to make you respond to any of this. I'm going to ask you this. You're coming out of college. You've never worked a job, like you said. What makes you decide to create a chatbot for real estate?
Can I intervene just for a second?
If you must.
I'm having a bad effect on you, Robert. Your questions was getting as long as mine. Right.
I mean, I can certainly try and respond to all that. I think it's all good and fair points for sure. I think just generally out of college, myself and my co-founder had always wanted to get into real estate in some way. We just didn't know how. So we ended up just talking to hundreds of realtors like during school and saying, hey, what's your day like? What do you do? What do you hate doing? And it was constantly, I hate following up with leads. I hate the behind the scenes stuff. I hate the mundane, set a task, create a task, complete a task, send a text, send an email. I hate it. And I understand it. It's the mundane part of sales. The fun part of sales is getting in the field, getting face-to-face, closing deals, getting closer to that commission check. So we set out to say, hey, let's solve this problem of lead follow-up and lead conversion with technology, not necessarily throw a bunch of humans at it, like a human call center that have been around for 20 years. But we knew going into it that we had to say, we need to create a human-like experience through conversation, just the same as a human call center does, especially in markets like real estate, mortgage, leasing. That's especially true. People are typically moving because of a big life event, the 3Ds of real estate or whatever, death, divorce, disease. Those aren't small things. People are typically moving because of those reasons or more positive reasons, like a new job. So that's how we set out to build the product. It was a lot harder to build it that way rather than just a really rudimentary, basic chatbot. So we set out on the hard path to make it feel really human-like, and put in, purposeful typos that we correct on purpose, emojis, empathy, human-like traits kind of throughout building this for the last 4 years, which has been fun, exciting, and eye-opening.
Beautiful. I figured I figured as much, but I would like to add one addendum as a lifetime salesperson, and this is definitely something that I figured out over many years. So many salespeople won't necessarily be there, but I will tell you this: I'll bet you if you talk to anybody that's in the top 1% of their field, they will think like this. Sales isn't about, at a certain level, isn't about getting closer to the commission check. Yes, you want to get compensated, and yes, you always keep your eye on that. But you know what a great salesperson will tell you? At the end of the day, what they want to be doing is they want to be creating new relationships. That's what they want to be doing. They want to be in the midst of creating new relationships. Chatbots kind of start that process, but the real relationship creation doesn't start until you and I are face to face. So that's what most really great salespeople will say, is that they want to get deeper into the relationship developing process, because some people buy from you, some people don't. That's part of the process.
Absolutely agree with that. One of the things that we spent a lot of time talking about in our ISA podcast was the DISC profile, if you're familiar with that, DISC. And like through and through, almost all of the real estate agents, top real estate agents that we see are really high I's, super personable, face-to-face people. They love the relationships. And then if you look at like top ISAs, the behind the scene folks, really low I. They don't like that. They don't like that relationship building, at least to some degree, not the degree that the top agents do. The best ISAs do really like building relationships. It's just kind of like, they'd rather sit in their room on a phone call, on a text, on an email, and build the relationship that way, less in person. So I completely agree. I think that the best salespeople across the board, whether they are ISAs, whether they are agents or just salespeople in any field, are looking to build relationships.
I've got a question, and then we're probably going to have to wrap it up for the podcast part of the show, Robert, and then move on to bonus content.
Sure.
Which my question on that is that I've observed there seems to be two buckets where agents kind of fall into that. There seems to be the kind of the Buffini, you have a small database, maybe 300 people, you keep them really tight, you invite them to events, you send them little presents on their, you have a database that tells you that when they have their birthdays, when their children have birthdays, you keep them really basically tight. And that has strengths and has its own problems. And then you've got a set of agents that really, they just want to get leads from Zillow, whatever source, and they ring them and they try and get there first, but they don't nurture either. First of all, would you agree with that? And secondly, I think the agent is going to be successful in the next couple of years is the agent that can mix the two together in a coherent structure. What's your remark about that, Nat?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that that's a pretty fair assessment to kind of group different agents' philosophies into. I would also agree that combining those two creates a really healthy business. Something that I've talked about a lot in the past is, the right answer is never just one answer or one solution or one silver bullet. A healthy business in real estate has leads from Facebook, pay-per-click, Google, generated kind of on your own or with a system like MailRight. They also have a healthy flow of, portal leads, because portal leads are very expensive, but they're pretty low in the funnel typically. And you have a healthy system in place to nurture those existing leads that you have and your sphere of influence for the long period of time. Because essentially you've paid for all those leads over the course of 10, 15 years. We see people with databases in the hundreds of thousands, and there's people in there who are ready to move. So staying in front of them is essentially like free lead generation, or at least covering your expense on the amount of money that you spent on that lead maybe 10 years ago to get them to convert eventually. So I think a healthy combination of, your own leads, pay-per-click leads, portal leads, and a system to generate and nurture your existing database is a really good, healthy business.
So it's time for us to end the podcast, Robert, and go on to bonus content.
All right. So ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, real estate professionals of all ages and sizes, we appreciate you tuning into the MailRight Show, which apparently you are doing in ever increasing numbers. We question your sanity, but deeply appreciate your insanity. So thank you so much for listening to John and I ramble on about real estate marketing. Thank you for joining us as we interviewed Nate, who has been amazing and exactly what I expected that we would have, which is somebody who's on the bleeding edge of real estate technology. He's probably a little bit stepped out in front of where many of you are, but I'm here to tell you, you probably want to follow him. You want to catch him when he's talking on other podcasts. You want to listen to what he has to say about automating your process, especially for those of you. Now, he hasn't said this, but I will say this. I strongly believe that Nate and his team at Structurally are probably something you want to look at. If you're making like your personal income somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000 a year or more, this is something that you would be ridiculously, it would be dumb for you not to try to look at this and see where you could maybe take out like a human being that you're thinking of installing in the process or optimizing the process. So that's what I've got for you in terms of this. So John, actually, wait, Nate, I'm going to go with you first. I've just plugged you pretty hard. So how are people going to actually follow up on this and like find you and follow you and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, you can always just find us at structurally.com. We're trying to put out as much content as possible. I think I always like to put my money where my mouth is too. We love when people try the assistant, the AI assistant themselves as a lead to get that experience firsthand, which you can always do that yourself at testyouraiassistant.com. Actually, I think it might be test my AI. No, it's test your AI assistant. Sorry. Momentary brain fart there, but it's testyouraiassistant.com. So you can fill that out yourself and try and talk to it.
Gotcha. Sorry, my dad's calling me. Guys, I apologize. He never mind, doesn't matter. He's a little unfamiliar with my podcasting schedule. All right. Thank you for that, John. If people would like to get in touch with you and perhaps talk about how brilliant of a human that you are, how would they go about doing that?
It's really simple. Just go to the MailRight website. There's a phone number on there. If you call it and I'm available, I pick up the phone. And if you just want a quick chat for half hour about your marketing needs and you're looking for some advice, I'm more than happy to have a chat with you. So that you'll find the number on the website. Over to you, Robert.
Lovely. And for those of you who are wondering when or how you should call Jonathan in particular, I would say anybody in the first 1 through 5 years of their career, if you are not sure what you're supposed to be doing about lead generation or you're frustrated with the options, he might not be quite as knowledgeable about all the lead systems, but he's damn well close. He, like me, has interviewed hundreds of guys like Nate. And we, just like you said about your podcast, we've picked up a thing or two. And so he can probably be incredibly helpful, and the offer of his time is really cool. If any of you would like to learn anything about SEO or any of the longer term things that happen inside real estate marketing, I'm the dude for that. My blog is inboundrem.com. There's tons of world-class articles there that I've written myself or my team has written for me that talk about who the best real estate lead generation systems are, what tools you should be using, and the list goes on and on. So thank you for tuning in. We deeply appreciate it. If you're feeling inclined to be generous, please leave us a review on iTunes. I think we're still lacking a few. And Nate, are you okay staying for another 5 or 10 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So we're going to do some bonus content. We're going to leave it a secret. It's going to be a mystery. You're going to have to join us on the Mail-Right YouTube channel to find out what we decide to talk to Nate about for an additional 5 to 10 minutes after we end the podcast. With no further ado, thank you for tuning in to the podcast. 3, 2, 1. All right, welcome back. We are now finishing up with our bonus content with Nate Joens. We are extremely excited. He is the founder of one of the more innovative technologies that's out there inside the real estate space, a company called Structurally. They actually have a surprisingly wide adoption. I don't know that he would agree with that. So here's my bonus content question. All right, I have a couple times alluded during the podcast part of the show to who I thought Structurally should be used by, for sure, like guaranteed, like you should take a look at this, no doubt about it. Obviously, you as the founder of your own technology startup have a different opinion about that, and you're being very kind. You're not correcting me or jumping in. So what would you say is your perfect use case?
Yeah, I mean, I think I did kind of speak to some of them on the podcast part of this, so definitely give that some thought. But just as a whole, like I said, new leads and old leads, I think, it's not one or the other, it's both. There is an insane amount of gold in your existing database. if you have systems in place to kind of mine for that, like structurally, you can bring in an existing database. We can kind of sift out and warm up those cold leads. I think that's a really strong use case. But obviously, I do think that the kind of upfront instant engagement and two-way communication with those new leads is also extremely valuable. My favorite use case is definitely with those pay-per-click leads. We typically see that pay-per-click leads just generally are longer term. That's the reason that they're relatively cheaper to buy. That does mean that they're a little higher in the funnel, though. They're kind of top of funnel, and they take typically 12 to 18 months to convert. You have to have systems in place to follow up with them and get in touch with them at the right time, because you never know when that time will be. And like I said earlier, speed to response is huge. So when you actually get a reply, you need something or someone in place to get them to an appointment or some next step. So I think that just as a whole, whether it is new leads or whether it is old leads, a lead is a lead. You want to build that relationship early and often, and that's something that our product helps with.
Yeah, I just want to say a quick. I thought that was an excellent answer, and that. But I think the other thing that your product really helps and is consistency. I think this is a person-to-person relationship industry, and that's why the small people can still have a future and compete, because it wasn't for that element, it would have disappeared a few years ago. But what is lacking with a lot of people is consistency, and a system like yours and mine, that's where we really help, isn't it? I feel is on the issue of consistency. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Yep. Humans are notoriously inconsistent. Luckily, computers aren't. That's just always a funny jab I like to take at us as humans. But it's kind of true, that mundane follow-up, those mundane tasks of constantly remembering to reply gets tricky. There's a lot that you have to manage as a human, especially in the day-to-day of your company. And that's something that our product helps with.
Sorry to interrupt, Robert. I just wanted to make that remark.
So what I was actually talking to, because you're right, you did talk about use cases, but what I was speaking to was user profile, not use cases. That's what I was asking about. So user profile would be more like, what is like agents, brokers, how long have they been in the business? Without meaning to, you've actually answered the question a little bit, but I want to hear you. I would like to hear your verbal thought out response, even though I have articulated it to a degree for you, but I'd like to hear you say it.
Yeah, I do think that it is folks who have some database or some amount of leads coming in, and it can be small. Like I said, our pricing isn't particularly expensive. So even if you're just getting off the ground and you're just starting to build your lead funnels, that will quickly compound. I'm here to say that as soon as you're starting to generate, 10, 20 leads a month, take that times another year, and you're going to consistently see those leads from past months pile up. And you would have wished that you would have implemented some sort of follow-up system like Structurally or otherwise earlier on. So I will say, there's much more of an immediate impact in using a service like Structurally for probably more experienced agents, veteran agents. But I think that for newer agents, there's never a better time than now to get your systems in place for lead nurture and follow-up, even if you're not generating, a huge volume of leads or have a huge database yet.
And just so, to the degree that you're able, can you give us a rate? Because you're like, hey, the price isn't that expensive, but there is no pricing on your site. And I honestly don't know what your pricing is. I've never bothered to dig into it. So would you mind giving us a range?
Yeah, it starts at $299 a month. And it can go up to, $1,000 a month. And it's all based on lead volume. That first plan at $299 a month includes 200 leads in a given month. So or 100 leads, 100 leads a month, then it kind of goes up from there.
Gotcha. John, I think that's go ahead.
I've got one more question. Because you've been involved in in technology now and with the focus on real estate, how do you think when it comes to technology terms, how do you think the real estate digital marketing area what directions do you see, any patterns and directions where it's going to move in the next couple of years? I would have imagined you've been thinking about that. Hopefully you can share what you've been thinking with our audience.
Yeah, I think we definitely are seeing a shift more towards being in control of your own destiny, generate your own leads, either internet leads or work your sphere of influence or past client database really heavily, so that you are in control and you're not reliant on big brands, big portals. But I think that you're going to see much more of like a dichotomy between those two, and a little less of both. There's going to be a lot of people on the fence, whether on either side of the fence, where they're like, I'm going to be in control of all my leads and never pay for any leads, basically, or at least to the big brands. And then there'll be folks who are like, I'm going to tie myself really closely to the big brands because they're doing all sorts of new models. They're doing referral models where you don't pay for leads up front and you pay out of, a percent of your commission at close. I think that model alone is getting a lot of newer agents in the door with those big brands, because obviously you love that idea. If I don't have to pay for my leads up front and you just take some kind of my commission at close, guaranteed there's going to be some ROI, and that's an easy way in the door. But when you're a more experienced agent, that percent hurts a lot more. And you would much rather have your systems work those leads that you're generating for $2, $3, $4, $5 versus, thousands of dollars out of your commission rate. So I think you're going to see somewhat more of a split between those two moving forward, at least on the digital marketing side.
I agree with that a lot.
Yeah,
It's a good observation.
I thought that was fantastic. Thank you so much. So let's wrap it up, Robert. But I'd like to say that you've been a fantastic guest. You dealt with our banter very effectively, and hopefully you agree to come back on the show. We love you to come back, Nat.
Yeah, absolutely. This was great. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I would like that a lot too. And if the next time, if you do decide that you're going to make a little bit more time for our particular podcast, because I'm sure you have plenty of offers, I would love to do a little bit of forward thinking. We've talked about what it is and what it does and potentially who uses it, and certainly talking about databases, and that's great. Forward thinking could include maybe applications in the social world, applications that haven't quite happened yet that might in the future, like things, what's next, because I do see structurally as being more on the cutting edge in terms of some of the things that I know of that you guys are being used for. So for anybody that's interested, and you, Nate, yourself, most in particular, if you decide that you're interested in, once again, talking to me and John, that's probably one of those dialogues that I would like to have, is where are we going next? How can we apply it? What are you going to do as a tech entrepreneur to stay in front of that wave? Maybe I can add in, so can John. We're both smaller entrepreneurs than you are, but not by far. So anyway, thank you so much for making the time. I didn't even know that John had reached out to you. I saw it come through my email and I'm like, really? You got one of the guys from Structurally? That's going to be awesome. Anyway.
I always amaze him with the quality of guests that I managed to get on the show. So there we go.
Yeah, but then he was like, you should research these guys. I'm like, I don't need to. Yeah. I know exactly who they are. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you all again the next time. If you could take us offline, sir.